You're tuned into the Growth Ceilings podcast, the show for builders, dreamers, and leaders ready to break limits and grow beyond what they thought possible.
Welcome to the Growth Ceilings podcast. I'm your host, Jim Lovelady, professional EOS implementer. EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. This show is about real conversations with leaders who bring clarity to complex challenges and help organizations operate with confidence. Today, I'm joined by Nick Holzher. Nick is a company builder, entrepreneur, and investor. He's the founder of Wisk.com, which was acquired by Samsung, where he went on to lead and scale Samsung Food. He's also the founder of GitLaw and an active angel investor focused on deep tech innovation. Nick has built and scaled companies across technology, food, and SaaS, and brings a unique perspective on innovation, execution speed, and building products that actually solve real problems. Nick, welcome to the Growth Ceilings podcast.
Awesome to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So why don't you just kind of give me an overview of GitLaw and what you're currently doing?
Absolutely. So we're basically building an AI agent for legal documents designed for small businesses. It can be anywhere. If you're a founder and you need some startup documents, employment contracts, whatever it is, or a medium-sized business and you're doing sales contracts and a larger volume of contracts. Our agent drafts and reviews documents. It's free. It has free e-sign integrated too. But what it does that goes beyond like Claude or OpenAI is it basically has a whole bunch of legal knowledge built into it and process built into it, which results in a better quality, more trusted document than what you would if you were generating something from scratch. It basically uses like lawyer-reviewed templates to base all of its stuff on. So we've been building that for about 10 months. We're backed by US venture capital. We're a distributed team, globally distributed. There's about 20 of us. The team that's building this has built about, 3 companies together. And we built Wisk together. We built, before that, an HR SaaS tool together. And now we are building something for legal because we are basically fed up of spending so much money on legal services. I personally spent over $1 million on legal contracts. A lot of that was in like buying businesses or selling businesses, but also just in kind of when you raise capital, growing the business, you spend a lot of money on legal fees and it takes a lot of time. And so trying to solve my own problem, really.
So the inspiration truly was the experience of buying legal services in another area of your life, of your entrepreneurial experience. And you now identified that as a problem and have created GitLaw, correct?
That's right. And, there obviously the majority of people trying to build something in the legal tech AI space are targeting law firms. And that's kind of an obvious route to go because they're heavy users of making contracts for obvious reasons. That's their job. Our focus is different, right? We're not targeting lawyers. We're targeting the small businesses because we believe with AI, they should be able to drastically reduce time and cost of creating legal documents or reviewing them.
So let's go back to Wisk. What problem were you trying to solve initially and how did that vision evolve as the company grew?
So initially, I was trying to solve my own problem of not knowing what to cook, not being very good at cooking. When you look at, a recipe site, especially a UGC recipe site, like All Recipes, the main image looks great. Then you swipe to one of the oldest images or what the users actually cooked and it's like burnt and often people are proud of the burnt images, but I wasn't proud of my burnt images. Mine were probably worse than the ones people upload to these web sites. So I just basically I love eating. I wasn't that good at cooking and I wanted to fix that problem for myself. So I created a user facing app where people could save recipes and create shopping lists and buy the ingredients and do meal plans. And the problem I found was, I was basically not able to get enough users. I got hundreds of thousands, but not the millions that you need to make a huge, a user facing consumer app like that work. So we pivoted to become a B2B platform. It was AI driven. So we built a lot of technology to basically understand what recipes should you surface when, how should you create shopping lists, how do you transfer it to a grocery store? And a lot of that was AI driven, early days AI. So this is not the same as no LLMs involved. It was all machine learning. It was before TensorFlow, a lot of the manual, what was called natural language processing models that we were using. So we built a lot of that technology for ourselves, couldn't make the user-facing experience work at enough scale, and then basically just made that available to other businesses to use instead. And that really worked. That pivot was super painful. It took us through going from 30 people to 2, but then went back up again to 120 when it started to really work. And, we became profitable, and it felt very, very different once there was like this product market fit, which we found, compared to the previous thing, which was like really quite painful because we were building great app, but just couldn't get it to enough scale.
But you did scale globally to eventually be acquired by Samsung, right?
Yeah. I mean, we got to 500 million monthly users on our platform, not on like the Wisk.com platform, but on all the partners that are using our platform that integrated our experience. So we had 500 million people's a lot. We had the biggest companies in the world using us. The platform is still integrated with all the grocery shops that you probably know, like Walmart and Amazon and Tesco, and globally in the US, UK, Australia, and Europe. We also had some of the biggest recipe sites like Food Network and All Recipes and BBC Good Food, and big CPG brands like McCormick and Nestle and Unilever. So we had some really, really big companies using the platform. And it was really probably like 2 to 3 years after the pivot where we had suddenly this interest from some of the biggest global technology companies and appliance manufacturers all at the same time coming to us saying, hey, we love what you've built. We'd love to integrate it into our bigger company. Can we buy this kind of integrated marketplace that you've built? We weren't at this point, we weren't planning to sell. We're enjoying scaling what finally finding product market fit. And the feeling of scaling is very different to the feeling of trying to find product market fit. It was really fun. And it was also fun making money. We were profitable. But when you have a whole bunch of people asking you at the same time, do you want to sell? It was kind of made sense for us to look at those offers, and we felt it made sense for us to join Samsung in the end.
What a great story. Do you miss some of that? Do you miss that journey, that experience you just described?
Well, I mean, definitely, which is why I'm chasing it again. Right? So like I wasn't, after joining Samsung, the expectation is people leave, right?
Right.
They expect most founders last 1 to 2 years. I stayed there for, I think, more than 6 years. Like I genuinely enjoyed being part of like the Samsung like business. It was super fun. But I left and started again from scratch because I missed that early part. And I would say, I'm grateful for that decision I made. What I didn't quite expect is how intense it is in 2026 and 2025 building an AI company. The whole space is changing every month, every 2 months. And like it used to change too. It's not like I'm new to change, but change used to happen on a slower kind of, it might change every 6-12 months. A new person would raise some money, or the new technology would be available maybe every couple of years. That would change, the landscape of how you should build. But never before has it changed at this velocity of it feels like every week or two, there is something seriously new that you need to know as an entrepreneur. Otherwise, you're going to fail because you're going to misdiagnose or misunderstand the market that you're trying to build for. So it's super fun, but it's also it's intense building in 2026, I would say.
Yeah, you just almost described where you were stepping forward, advancing with Wisk, and you were constantly moving and trailblazing and doing all those things. And then now in the AI environment, it almost sounds defensible. It's like you're defending your position, you're trying to keep up, and it's moving so fast. Somehow expiration dates come in here some way, but I haven't figured it out yet. But it sounds like there's almost like a mindset shift in the environment you're in today.
Yeah, I think there's more time on research. I think you have to allocate more of your time to thinking about what to build. The actual building part is actually easier in many ways than it ever has been before. We were at Wisk building AI models ourselves, which would take 6-12 months to build each iteration of. Now AI is basically free. It's just like an API that you hook into, and that is the best practice. Building your own model makes no sense for 99% of companies. But that's an amazing leveler, because whether the biggest players in our space that have raised the most money are called Harvey and Legora. They've raised hundreds of millions or billions, and we're on the same, we have the same AI as they do, right? So then it's an amazing leveler. And so does the one person shop who's doing it themselves in a bedroom. We all have the same AI, right?
Right.
That's really empowering for the smaller teams and scary for the bigger ones. But it's also So now it becomes much more about like, what's the workflow, and what data are you storing for the user? How are you solving the user problem? How you're acquiring the user? There's a lot of other problems, and a lot of that requires a lot of thought. And because the space is changing so frequently, and thought becomes somewhat easier because it's AI assisted thought, so you can load your stuff into the different LLM models, and they can help you think and they can help you debate. But it's quite intense because there's so much information and so much to process and so much like to figure out of like where is your market position. So yeah, it's a different time to build. I love it, but it's definitely intense.
Yes, and I gotta believe it impacts your decision-making processes, what you're used to doing, fulfilling a project and having 100% confidence before you proceed. Whereas now, based on the speed you're describing, hopefully I'm saying this the right way, you got to do things much faster and perhaps not with all the information, and you got to make assumptions more often than perhaps you're used to doing.
That's true. I think there's also an element of the assumptions, that what drove those assumptions changes quite frequently. It's like, you kind of want to be careful about spending 6 months trying to figure something out and then building something, which might have been the right strategy before. It kind of doesn't cut it anymore. You kind of want to be like, have the right frameworks to make decisions, take a snapshot of where you are, project where it goes forward, build based on that, but just keep measuring again and again. Keep looking at what's happening in the market, what's happening in the AI models. Read a lot about what thought leaders in the space think. I think there's never been a more important time to organize the information in your company in a clear way. So like, I'm a big user of Claude Code myself, which is basically just, you create lots of files with all the context of your business and the market and the research you have, and then you can put that all into as context for the LLMs. So, which means that they can help you navigate all this information in a more structured way. So I'm a big fan of that because like there's so much information to process that you have to be very structured in how you process that information and how you make decisions quickly and repeatedly and refresh those decisions as new information comes out.
So how do you protect that speed? How do you protect that as a strategy, as an attribute, as a differentiator for you and your team? How do you protect that as the organization gets larger?
That's a great question. And I guess I've experienced the slowdown as you go from, 10 to 30, there is some slowdown. 30 to 100, there's a lot of slowdown.
Yes.
And then beyond that, there's more as well. I think there's different ways of doing it. I don't know whether I found the perfect way. What I appreciated myself was we implemented a model when we were at Samsung called tribes and squads, or squads and tribes, where basically you organize into sub teams that are like self-sufficient. They have all the right, if you're building a tech product like I am, you have the developers and the designer and the PM all within that kind of unit, so they can ship something themselves without having to rely on other teams. And you have lots of these teams all kind of like building stuff that kind of connects together, but like are able to move independently. So basically you split your large thing into lots of smaller things. That's definitely a model that I have had success with. The other one I think is culture and values of your business become more important, I think, than they have in the past as well. And hiring to those, making sure that you hire people with high agency, as in people who can take ownership and deliver stuff, don't have to be told by somebody else.
Right.
I do think there is more of a sway towards hiring more senior people in your team as well. Because often those senior people have the experience to make those decisions and own projects all the way through. And those senior people can have high productivity because they have all these AI agents that help them as well. So I think I'm also a big fan of distributed work. Personally, I have I've basically since 2016, I've been running on a fully distributed team. I've had offices here and there in the mix, but like overall it's been fully distributed. And I'm a big fan of that model because you can hire people from anywhere, you can hire experts. I think the async way of working or the distributed way of working means that you have to work well async, and AI agents and tech tools typically work really well if you have a well-documented, kind of a good asynchronous way of working. So those are things that I'm using like practically every day to try and do that. But like, is there a magic formula? I guess the stuff that you're doing with EOS is part of that too, right? Which is like making sure that you're clear with your vision and mission and down to your goals and down to like how you align everyone in your team. And like that's super important, critical in making sure that you can make that work.
For everyone listening in here on Growth Ceilings podcast, Nick, you're over in the UK currently, correct?
That's right.
And you've got a distributed team, but GitLaw is positioned out of San Francisco, correct?
That's right.
So you've led distributed teams long before it became common. What have you learned specifically about culture and execution across time zones?
Well, yeah. So the most extreme time zone situation I had was at Samsung. I had a team of 120 people in, I think it was 9 or 10 different time zones. I had people in, I had an office in LA and I had an office in San Francisco. I had one in the UK. I had one in Berlin. I had one in Tel Aviv. I had one in Belgrade, and I had one in Seoul. And then people all around as well. And Seoul is +8 GMT, sorry, -8 GMT, and LA and San Francisco is +8. So basically, you literally had 16-hour time difference within the team and lots of people in between and all the different cultures and all the different languages and everything in between, right? So like that was extreme. I wouldn't recommend that extreme level at like a small startup because there's a bunch of overhead in managing that too. But I definitely think it's absolutely fine to have 5-6 hours difference between your overall team. That works really well, I think. What did I learn? Well, I think it does come down to working really, really well asynchronously. So, and it's not actually anything genius or different to what you'd recommend for someone working well in an office, like altogether. It's just that when you're not in an office altogether, it becomes imperative, as in critical for you to do it well, because if you don't, your business fails. Whereas if you're in an office, there are kind of like ways to sellotape and sort of make it still roughly work. Like you can still like look over someone's shoulder and interrupt them and say, excuse me, what are you working on? But when you're in a distributed world, you can't, right? So it's a lot about documentation. So making sure that you share where your projects are at, how everyone's working, what everyone's working on, making sure you document how each of the parts of the system works, making sure that you hire for certain values, for ownership or for good asynchronous communication. There's certain people that work really well in that environment and proactively reach out and share what they're doing. Or if they're stuck, proactively read the documentation. There's other people who don't, and they want more kind of like synchronous on-call kind of coaching with everything. Those people work less well in an asynchronous environment, in my experience. So it's like, it's a lot about hiring the right people, setting them up with the right tools and the right processes to work asynchronously. And then everything that I think that probably EOS advocates for around making sure that your business is aligned to the mission and vision and goals of the business all the way through to what everyone's working on. And then if you do that well, I think it actually is highly productive. And we were doing this, since 2016, way before COVID. We were fully distributed. I've been mostly distributed since 2012. And I have found that we were able to build teams that were much lower cost than people that were building competitors just out of LA or just out of San Francisco who had raised a lot more money than us, but couldn't execute at the same speed or the same cost because of their physical location kind of limitations. And that basically, I think it was literally the difference between for us winning and not winning. I actually think that distributed nature was critical in our success.
Talk a little further about how you go about the recruiting process. When you talk about different cultures, different time zones, how do you ensure the people that you are attracted to meet your core values?
So, there's a few things. First of all, articulating those values, obviously really, really important. I have recruiters. I've always had recruiters in my team that are not external, but like internal people that I've had in my, who worked with me and done a lot of the kind of like spent a lot of time on the sort of search and selection part of that of the pipeline. Then when you get through to interviews, there are different methodologies. There's one of them is, you give someone a big case study to do. Actually, I have found the opposite to be, or not the opposite, but I guess in some ways opposite, some ways more extreme, which is you give them a trial period. And you give them a trial period of a month or two, or sometimes a week or two, depending on what their own circumstances. If they haven't got a job at the time, then it's often great to give them a month trial. If they have got a job, it's often better to do it part-time in their evenings and weekends and start work for a period of time. It might be a couple of weeks. Actually see how they are. Like that, I found there's no replacement for just experiencing working with somebody. That's the best test. Whenever my best hires have come from that, but that's not always possible. That's not possible in every jurisdiction. And when that's not possible, then things like case studies are very helpful.
So many founders hit a growth ceiling when scaling their teams. What leadership shifts did you have to make personally as your companies have grown?
I think I've always enjoyed reading. So I read a lot. When I work out in the gym, which I try to go, do 3 or 4 hours a week, and I will always be listening to an audiobook. So that's been like super helpful to me, is like reading or listening to books about this exact topic is kind of what I do a lot. Although I have to be honest, in recent 6-12 months, I've been listening to more AI, just trying to keep up with what's happening in AI. So I've been listening to a lot of that content, which is more podcasts usually. But like I've also been very lucky to benefit from mentors. So I had some, when I joined Samsung, one of the like reasons that we actually chose Samsung was the team that was acquiring us was super experienced in the building tech startups, as in successful tech startup space. And they would basically be working directly. So I reported to a guy called Travis. He was the ex-head of product at Uber. Before that, other kind of like impressive companies. He had experience of how to do this well. And, and alongside we had someone called Dane, who was ex-head of product, ex-head of design at Airbnb, and somebody else. It was all kind of like these leaders in the space who knew what they were doing. And I learned a huge amount from them. Some of that was about letting go. The effort often, I'm 40 now, but like when I was 30, it would feel painful to not do something myself, because like I knew that I could do it well. But actually then realizing that coaching someone else to do it, maybe not at 100% of what you would do, 80% is actually more effective for you as a manager. And what you end up finding is when you hire really smart people, that they don't do it at 100%, but they do it at 150% of what you could do, because they're the expert and because they're really good, and they have the time to focus on it. But that's only becomes clear after you've kind of gone through that whole journey. So I've been lucky to benefit from great mentors, and also benefit from great employees or like colleagues who work for me, report to me, but tell me how to improve and tell me that I'm crap at something. That's been really helpful too. So like, I probably get more value, if I'm honest, from people. The most value probably comes from people who work for me, who tell me how to improve.
I can tell you really appreciate the mentorship. When you are attracted to that mentor, you value that and you reciprocate, and I can sense that in you, and I identify 100% with what you're sharing. The other thing you talked about was delegation, and as a result of that delegation, and you talked about who else may take on your task. As you release that, what did you find for yourself? What was the benefit for yourself as a result of delegating and elevating?
I think you get to spend time on the bigger picture, which turns out to be exactly what you should be doing, and what's by far the most valuable. So spending time on what is the strategy of the company, where are we going in this world, especially in today's world where things are changing so much. But you basically get time to spend time doing that. And that is, you get the opportunity to step back, go, what's most important for this business? And it's not always product strategy, right? Sometimes it's also like, in Samsung, it was also politics, right? There was a lot of, it's an enterprise, and in an enterprise, there's a lot of politics. So you have to figure that out. But then having the time and the space in your head to figure that out, like the most value that I can provide this business or today is 30% product and 30% politics and 30% sort of mentorship of people who report to me, or whatever that mix is. But being able to have the headspace to figure that out and then actually execute it, that's where like real I think where you should focus as a founder or CEO or managing director or whatever your title is. If you're head of a product or a business, that's what you should be spending your time on to be most effective. But I do meet people who haven't fully made that transition and they're still in the weeds and they struggle. But like, I think it comes down to having good people, to be honest. Like, it all comes back to, if you hire great people and you trust them to do great work, partially because they're great and partially because you've been able to get over that hump and trust them, then actually everything else kind of becomes obvious. It's just like, but if you're missing great people, that's when your problem starts. And then you don't have time to hire more great people. And then you're just in this like mess. And I've definitely been in that mess in times, in my past.
In the introduction, I shared that you are an angel investor. As an investor, what mistakes do you see founders repeating when building early stage companies?
That's a great question. I think a lack of like clarity on where revenue or where money is going to come from in the business eventually, it can be it is a problem I definitely see. So early on in the kind of the investment raising stage, right? It basically, it sounds complicated. Like the product is kind of roughly clear, but like everything feels complicated. And when things feel complicated, usually don't work in my experience. Like you kind of need to be able to distill it in something that's actually, most things that work, it might be a really complicated product, but then it's like, I'm going to create this really complicated product, but I'm going to sell it for $1,000. That's like simple to me, right? Like it costs me $100 to make and I'm going to sell it for 1,000. Simple business model. Like, yes, there might be really complicated what goes inside it, but like, it's a simple business. But yeah, often you hear these convoluted stories, and that's definitely one area. I think the other part is not focusing enough on people and like why the people should win. So like, why does an individual have the right to win in this market when there's so many other competitors? Or how have they put together a team that has the right to win?
Right.
So having a great team, I think, is one of the key things that I look out for as well. I think, yeah, and then there are a lot of other things that obviously come down to the specifics of which industry they're in, and choosing the right industry. Choosing an industry where you actually have a chance to win is also important. You get people who come with this, like, a lot of people, again, have ideas for things that they think would work, but there are other really, really big players there, and they underestimate those big players. They underestimate how difficult it actually is to do what they're proposing to do. And there are other giants, and there's no real reason why they should win against the giants. Like the giants are just, they feels from the outside like they're failing. But when you actually get into it, you realize, oh, actually, these are just like fundamental industry problems. And like, they've got $100 million and I've got $1 million and there's no way I'm going to win. Now that's also, I'm also aware that often the advice I give entrepreneurs might be totally wrong because like, I'm not in it in the same way. And I think, if you listen to the people who have succeeded, like I think the Airbnb is probably a famous example where they were told no so many times before they made it, right? And like, there's so many times, so many ideas sound ridiculous when you first hear them. And then some people try it, and then it works and it becomes huge. So like this, I guess, as a founder, you have to be careful not to listen to everyone's advice because ultimately the people who have usually made it really, really big have been told no a lot before they get there.
That is gold. Thank you for that. You've experienced both building from zero and operating within global scale. How should leaders think differently about innovation inside large organizations?
So I think I'm sure it depends on which organization, but like in my limited experience of larger organizations, which is basically Samsung. I mean, I did work for Deutsche Bank, which was a large investment bank before as well. But like in my limited experience of Samsung, I think it's like what makes sense for this business. So is what you're building at enough scale, considering like everything, because like the cost of doing business when you're an enterprise is quite high. So like everything costs more money. You can't take the same risks that a small startup has because you've got a lot more to lose. If you mess it up, your brand has got a lot to lose. And therefore you have to be careful with the legals and the IP or you have to do all this stuff, right? But it means that anything you do, anything the organization does that's not, copy and replicate their existing business model, anything that's innovative and goes different, costs a lot of money to do, a lot of people and a lot of time. So it has to make sense on a large scale for that company, like strategically. And then, being super aware of that. It's also, change is hard, I think, in a large organization because like, it's the whole organization is designed to, I guess, protect value in the business and innovation can destroy it as well. So like you're sometimes, setting up a structure which allows you to innovate effectively. I see often organizations large enterprises make a mistake in assuming that because they own something, it makes it more valuable. And I think it's actually almost the opposite, right? Whereas like, a large company, if they assumed, oh, we'll create this little bubble over in a corner, we'll isolate it from our main business and we'll just fund it. And because we own it, because we have funded it, it will be successful somehow. I think that's absolute, I've never seen that work. I'm sure there are lots of examples of it working. I've never seen that work. I think you kind of have to be very mindful of like how this fits into the overall organization, get buy-in for that, like fitting into the overall organization, and then, choose the USPs of the organization to make your thing work. So with Wisk and Samsung, as a practical example, we integrated that with hardware, right? So it's integrated on their hardware that ships, the ovens that ship, fridges, the TVs, a lot of their hardware ships with our software built in, and our software makes that hardware more valuable, makes it more useful. So like that's an example of like, it adds value to their core business, which is hardware. And as a side note, when it's integrated, that hardware integration gives it distribution, which means we get scale for the main application as well, which adds more value for the users on the platform and adds value to to the Wisk entity structure. So like that kind of synergy, I think, is important. Personally, I'm sure there are loads of reasons why I'm wrong. I can think of lots of other ways of structure. Google has a very different structure where they set things up in like different silos and everyone runs independently. I'm sure that works really well too. My experience is the one that I've described.
Let me get you out of here on this. This will be the last question. For a founder listening right now who feels stuck between growth and complexity, what is the most important thing they should focus on next?
I mean, growth has to be the key thing, which is what do customers want? Trying to get signal on what do customers want. So spending time in your analytics dashboard, is there some kind of sign of what people want in there? If there's not, fine, but talk to customers, potential customers, find out what would be valuable to them. What doesn't exist. So speak to the people you're trying to sell, or somehow get data on that. I think, the dashboards are the easiest. Speaking to people physically is probably the hardest. And I would recommend you do all of it. And there's lots of things in between, right? There's now AI agents that can go and do customer interviews for you, or there's automated video agency where you can click a button and $200 later, you have 30 people's user test all kind of video recorded. There's lots of it in between. Do those two things and a few things in between, and listen to your customers. And that should be like what you should try and figure out is, what do people want, and try and build what they want. It's really basic, but it's also the amount of people that do that is like small. Like, I think most people know that they maybe should, but I would say probably 10%, or I'm making this number up, but I think it's like something like, it maybe even less. Really, really small, the amount of people that actually do it. So do that would be my would be my number one recommendation.
It's kind of like working out consistently, right?
I guess I think more people do that than talk to their customers, right? But yeah, it is like that. It is like that too, exactly. Which, having a coach that helps you, reminds you to go and speak to those customers, just like having a PT that reminds you to go to the gym.
Yes.
Or a loving family member that reminds you. There's lots of ways of helping you kind of build that habit, but it's a hard habit when there's so many other easier things to spend your time doing, right? There's always some of those things feel uncomfortable, and the things that feel uncomfortable you naturally avoid. So,
well, Nick, this has been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed this with you. You've shown how growth ceilings often appear when leaders stop evolving their thinking as the business scales. Your experience moving from founder-led startups to operating inside a global organization like Samsung gives a clear view of what it takes to keep innovation alive while building real structure. What stands out is your focus on execution, clarity, and customer obsession. Those principles cut through complexity and help leaders keep moving forward even as organizations grow. For our listeners who want to learn more, you can connect with Nick on LinkedIn and explore his work at Nick Holzherr at .com. Thank you for joining me today, and thanks for everyone listening for being a part of the Growth Ceilings community. Until next time, keep growing, keep leading, and keep breaking through. Thank you.
You've been watching the Growth Ceilings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ready to grow.